Welcome, leaders, teams, and those ready to take charge of their energy. It's Kelly Buboltz, your guide in workforce energy management. Burnout is not just a buzzword, it's a symptom of deeper root cause stressors. We're here to stop waiting for the change and start leading it. It's time to reclaim our energy and lead our days with intention and purpose. Welcome today to the Workforce Energy Management webinar series, where we're going to be digging into some topics every month to guide you through this, to use the compass and a sense of direction out of this chaos into change management, leading the change instead of just reacting to it. Now, this month's topic in March is attracting and retaining top talent without job posting. I think we all know that the job post boards are just overloaded. People are just applying to things without reading the job descriptions. And that's because job descriptions are outdated or they're not around the actual purpose of the role. And it's all that like corporate fluff and puff. And people aren't energized by that. When you look at top talent, they're attracted to functional organizations, functional operations, and flexibility. So we're going to go through 4 big topics that you can start to apply in your organization this year that can attract and retain your top talent. Now, why this is important is when you talk about costs, when you really talk about how do we find time, how do we find a budget for this, I want you to consider the costs of not doing anything. Because in HR, 2 decades in HR and manufacturing, it was really hard to get a budget. It was hard to get focus when day-to-day fires were happening on the plant floors. But what we didn't realize is every time someone left, if top talent would ask for more salary and then leave later because that's just a temporary fix, we were bleeding money in the hidden workforce costs. That's not on the P&L. P&L is payroll. P&L is benefits. That's what we track. And what we know is what gets measured gets the focus, right? Well, I want you to measure turnover. I want you to measure turnover on an entry level. As you can see in the lower right of this picture, the statistics are 30% of their salary is the turnover cost for entry level. For mid-level, it's 50%. But for your key employees, for your leaders, it's 150% of their salary turnover costs. And that's because there's a ripple effect. There's organizational knowledge that is lost. There's key initiatives, strong initiatives that are no longer being led by that person. There are people that were led by them that now have that uncertainty and unstable type of environment. So we're going to go into these workforce costs a little bit more in future videos. Make sure that you subscribe out on this channel. Join the Workforce Energy webinar series as we dig into some of these hidden workforce costs and get you a budget, get you focused to start leading this change. Now, when we know this information and what it's going to cost us to lose a top talent, you can start to gain momentum on how we can apply this in our organization through these 4 factors. So I just wanted to reframe you, get you unstuck, because it seems like this is another thing to add to your plate. It's another thing we have to do with limited budgets. And I want you to reframe it that you can't afford not to. If you're going to lose top talent, you don't really have much left to your organization because top talent is your drivers. Top talent is your innovators. So let's go into the workforce energy management model for just a moment on the 4 factors on the outside. So the inside is 100% on individual control and the energy of how we show up, either positive or negative narratives. The outside is the best team that you've ever been on. And these concepts I grabbed from companies that thrive in chaos, companies that are able to adapt in changing environments. And that's because they have a guided sense of direction. Navigate, that's our north. They have strength in their communication and how they talk to each other, that healthy conflict they welcome. Who are you on this expedition? That's E. That team energy, that trust. And that's how you get workplace flexibility. That's how you get 4-day work weeks and unlimited PTO. Synergy. What is the team energy? What is that team trust? And then productivity optimization. We're no longer adding more. We are focusing on optimizing our outcomes, working on value-added work instead of just more activities. And that's our workflow, our W. So when you start applying this workforce energy management model and all the tools within this compass and sense of direction, you start to get people branding. Let's talk about that. So people branding is, how do they talk about you at conferences, at home, with their neighbor? When someone's looking for a job, do they automatically say, hey, we got to get you in here. It's the best place to work. I've never been happier. Or do they say, hey, you should probably apply there. I'm looking for another job too. How are you branding yourself? And I'm not just talking about your current top talent. I'm talking about the top talent that's exiting as well. When someone puts in their notice to go somewhere else, because you wouldn't really be firing top talent, right? That's very rare cases that come up where top talent is involuntarily exited. So I'm going to really focus on top talent leaving on their own terms. So resignations that voluntary leave. And what are they saying when they leave? Because interestingly enough, when I meet new people, they'll say, oh, I'm really good. I'm in a really good place now. I'm in a really good employer, but you should probably talk to my previous employer. And then they'll give me a name. That's not good branding, right? They're talking smack about you. They're talking about the dysfunction in your organization and the amount of stress and why they left. Not good branding. When you have great people branding of both current top talent talking about you and past top talent talking about you, you have a natural employee referral system. You have a natural branding in which you do not need to job post. People are lined up at the door. And interestingly enough, when I started speaking about this, there's a company that says we do that. We haven't job posted in 2 years. They have people lined up at the door just from their employees talking about their company and how they're treated. That culture, the flexibility, those workforce energy management factors we just talked about. So people branding, how are you showing up for your employees? So naturally, they can be your branding that people want to line up at the door, or they want to get in as interns or co-ops. So they want to get into that internal pipeline in which they want to develop in your organization. They want to keep the career path within your organization instead of developing at your organization, getting as much as they can, and then moving on, right? Have you ever met those people that they just love the work that they do? They love their company and they've been there a long time. There's pieces of that are from the workforce energy management, that there was good direction, there's good communication, there's really good trust and workflow. They wouldn't want to leave, regardless of salary and benefits. So you want to get to that sweet spot. Now, inside this talent magnet that we're talking about, I want you to also think about your operations, because I think sometimes on the onboarding side, it's great. On the visual side, it's great, but then they show up for the first day and nothing's ready. Operationally, there's dysfunction between departments and these silos. That cross-department dysfunction starts showing up. So on the outside, it looks great. Then they get on the inside and they see the dysfunction. They see the patches, they see the duct tape, and they see the dumpster fire, and they want out, right? They are already planning their exit in the first couple of weeks when they were excited. So operationally, how do you show up? Now, that's why we have to start closing those gaps in the cross-department pass-offs. That's why we have to start to address that workflow, the productivity optimization, because when, even in the best companies, if they get into the software and it's clunky, they already see the dysfunction. If they see two employees kind of gossiping behind each other's back and they just started, they don't want to be part of that drama. So when you look at top talent, they don't want that dysfunction. Operationally, how do you show up? And I actually saw this with my own family. My dad worked for a company for 48 years. And he always enjoyed going to work. And he kind of worked his way up on a career path from like assembly line all the way up to engineering. And when he retired, as an HR person, I asked him what he made because I felt comfortable at that point with him retiring way past retirement age. That was a good question just for me to see, how much do you make? Because he really enjoyed what he did. And he made way below the low part of the market. And he was a key employee. He was their top talent, and he was traveling around nationally training their other plant engineers in their software and things like that. He was their most tenure employee. They had extreme turnover at that point, and he worked past retirement. So he obviously loved what he did. And when I asked him, are you happy with your salary? And he said, in the last couple of years, it wasn't enough. So do you see the shift? He was always happy regardless of the salary. Now, you should pay your employees fairly. Let me just put that in there. But he was always happy regardless of the salary. What changed was the leadership. And they went through layoffs and acquisitions through those 48 years. They went through some change. But the kicker change for him was when the leadership changed and they did poor performance management, they did poor change management, and they stopped caring. They stopped caring about the little things like communication. They stopped caring about that trust. They started micromanaging things. And that's when salary came into his mind after 48 years. So you can already see that you can have the big salaries and the big benefits, but if you don't have the culture, they're still going to leave. Was it time for him to retire? Absolutely. But how he talked about that place on the way out wasn't great. And 48 years prior to that, he was bragging about it. He was getting people in there. He had nothing poor to say about this company until the leadership changed and they did poor change management, poor performance management, and the culture shifted. So just keep that in mind as we start to gross up people's salary and add all these fancy benefits, that it still doesn't replace culture. So the first piece is your talent magnet. The workforce energy management factors in which people brag about outside of your company is a natural magnet for other top talent to join. Now, let's talk about the second one, and that's DISC behavior science. And why I love this is it feeds natural energy. When you can job place people in their zone, in their energy zone, they thrive every day. If you mismatch it, they slowly die every day. It's an energy drainer. And what I mean is when we talk about job matching, there's work styles that love fast-paced work. They're very active. That's our D's and our I's, our dominance and influence. You have people that are more methodical, steady. There are data, detailed, analytical people. Those are our S and C's, supportive and compliance. If you mismatch this, that's where the drain happens. If you can match people to their work styles, they thrive in these environments, and so does your organization. Because the people that want to be active and move these initiatives forward and be the change agents, there are D's and I's, and they're in those type of roles, like sales, like recruitment. If you have a S or C, they might be taking their time and they might still be doing a good job, but they're holding back. They're holding everyone back because of the wrong role. They're more in the supportive. So maybe could they be on the onboarding side of recruitment? Maybe could they be the farmers in sales instead of the hunters always going after it? When you can job place people, you not only find their energy zone, but you can find a development plan that continues to feed the energy. Because when you feed the energy, they stay in that positive narrative. When you can't feed that energy, they move into the drama. They move into the victim. They start playing the hero, fixing everything around your operations, being over-responsible, making other people under-responsible. Or they become the villain, which means they're the bad guy. And they could be challenging your operations in a healthy conflict way, moving it forward, closing the gaps. But because we have this poor job matching and you're draining the energy, it goes right into a negative narrative, which is the villain. That's blame. That's blaming other departments, and they did this, and so doesn't do that. They move into blame. So when you can job match and get people in their energy zones, you know people thrive. When humans are in the zone, they naturally work harder. You don't have to push them. They naturally show up. So when you can job match from the beginning, when you can work on development plans using DISC behavioral science, you feed that need. Now you can also do other things outside of development and placement, like mentorship programs. Say I have a younger generation person that's a D, that's our fast-paced, dominant type of work style, and I have a more senior person that's been through the ringer, been through a bunch of different experiences as a high D as well. This person, this tenured person, can line up as a mentor for this new generation on how do you interact with people when you want to move faster and they're still looking at the details. How do you have conversations where you just want to get to the results and everyone's still working through the process and the steps, right? You have that natural work style alignment in your mentorship program. And then now, what happens when you use behavioral science or a tool like this is you move into workforce strategy. Instead of always just reacting to someone leaving, you're strategically thinking, how are you going to place someone? What are you looking for in a forward type of movement, the future of your organization? So maybe that top talent left now. What do you need in the future? Hire for that and job match. And so when you start doing that, it creates this flow within your operation that top talent are attracted to. Because when people are in their energy zones, it's an energy around your organization. It's the right seats, low waste, and there's not these extra bodies that you're carrying around. Top talent doesn't want to carry more, right? They're your high performers. They're already carrying a giant workload. They don't want to carry people who are under-responsible or poor performers not doing their job. And interestingly enough, the statistics say that 20% of leaders' time is just managing poor performance, managing that mismatch situation. So job matching saves a ton of time, not only at the upfront of onboarding, but in the retention side of leaders' time, HR's time, and any other supportive measures going around that poor performance management. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is productivity optimization. So in the workforce energy management model, this is our workflow. This is on the west side of the compass. When we talk about getting out more, we add more to people's plate. And as you know, I work with organizations to engage energy and productivity while preventing burnout. If you keep adding more, you're not only increasing burnout, but you're not actually getting the outcomes that you need, because as you overload, they start focusing less on the value-add activities. So when we look at productivity optimization, we're focusing on moving away from those activities and focusing more on the outcomes that we want and the steps to get there. So let's talk about productivity optimization in meetings. And a big kicker that I am seeing is in facilitators. So when I come into an organization, I might observe a meeting, or they'll be talking a lot about meetings and the dysfunction that comes into it. And I'll ask, who's your facilitator? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'll say, who's running the meeting? And usually it's whoever scheduled it. It doesn't mean that they're running the meeting. It just is a default of whoever owns this meeting is the person who scheduled it. Now, I will say the facilitator should own the schedule. They should also own the agenda and the flow and the energy of the room. It doesn't mean that they talk the most. It doesn't mean that they're, the big brother beating people down in the room. It means they're guiding the conversation so it stays productive and not draining. The number one pet peeve, aside from bad leaders, is dysfunctional meetings in the workforce. And an average of 31 hours per month per employee is wasted on dysfunctional meetings. So when we look at productivity optimization, again, we're not adding more meetings, we're getting rid of the bad ones or cleaning them up. So when I go into organizations working on this workflow, working on the workforce energy management model, one of the pieces or one of the tools we work on is training facilitators of meetings. So people who host the meetings the most often, and I'll train them on these 4 areas that come up. And how do we do that? How do we facilitate a meeting, and how do we guide it so it's productive? Keeping the discussion on time, having those time blocks in our agendas, rerouting back to productive discussion when we get into the solve mode a little too fast, or we kind of veer off to all the black holes that come up. There's always going to be black holes. We need to make sure we're focused on the purpose of this meeting. We work on how we manage emotional outbursts while still giving people a voice. A huge change management factor is we want to make sure people are speaking up, having that psychological safety to ask questions, but we also have to manage emotional outbursts when it goes too far. And then how do we close out meetings and the discussion so there's good follow-up actions and owners as we exit? So are your facilitators of meetings trained? And that will gain you a lot of productivity and momentum and energy back in your organization naturally when you have functional meetings. As top talent enters your organization or evaluates if they want to stay in your organization, Meetings are going to be a big kicker. If they just go into meetings and you continually talk about the same thing or things that are in the system, or it's out of hand most of the time, no one's facilitating it, that's an energy drainer. Why would they stay in your organization, especially if it's meeting after meeting after meeting and they go home and they don't have that sense of progress? Do you see where some of these non-salary, non-benefit things are coming in which you can attract and retain that top talent? Now, meetings, this meeting production, meeting productivity that we're talking about, it goes outside of the conference room. It goes outside of the virtual meetings. It's in everyday practice. Are you okay with ending a meeting early? I allotted for 30 minutes for this webinar, and I'm intentionally ending early so you can take notes. So you can start to create intentional space after meetings to absorb the information. But what we do currently is we butt up right to the time, and then another meeting starts. And if you butt up right to the time, or most likely spill over, you're already late to your next meeting. And you haven't observed anything. You haven't observed actions. You haven't taken notes. You haven't had a moment of space to create from whatever details and information came out of that meeting because you jumped into the next meeting. So the organization that I was talking about that hasn't job posted in 2 years, they actually only have 45-minute meetings. And you need a good case to make it more than 45 minutes. It has to be something very specific, like a strategic meeting that really gets into the deep work, planning, and brainstorming. But otherwise, their meetings are 45 minutes or less. And the reason why is they always start at the top of the hour. So that gives everyone 15 minutes to get where they need to go, to take notes, to reset. And then they even have some rules for some of their client meetings that you block off a half hour beforehand so that you can prep. You can prep for that client meeting. You can reset your mindset, because I don't know about you, but I've had situations where I've had a very bad meeting and then I have to go into like a candidate interview and show up with a smiley face. And I just came from a crap show. And that type of switch mentally is exhausting. That type of switch all day long doesn't want me to go. I don't want to come back the next day. I just went through like 16 different emotions and not had a moment to process it or absorb all the action items that I just got on my to-do list. So can you end early and be comfortable with that? So when I say in everyday practice, if you are done with the agenda, the facilitator or someone in the meeting needs to call it and say, thanks everyone. And then if people want to hang around and chit chat, that's on them. But the meeting isn't held captive until it completes the time. Now, Parkinson's law states that work will fill available time. So if I give you a half hour for a meeting, you're going to focus on the value add task. If I give you an hour for that same topic, you will still fill that hour because work expands to fill available time. So when you think about everyday practice, I want you to get comfortable with practicing, we are done, we can leave, right? Because we're losing productivity by just filling space, filling with more discussion that we don't need to have or more activities that we don't need to do. Be okay with leaving early. Now, when you talk about meetings, are you using systems right in your meetings? Are you double dutying, triple dutying after the meetings? Are you using AI to grab some of those chat features to send out notes after for action hours? Make sure you clean them up before you send them out. Or are you still doing paper notes and then someone goes back, types them up, sends them out? Again, you're adding more activities. So how can you streamline in your current systems, integrating the meetings into your operations? And you want systems working for you, not against you. Now, the fourth tool that I want to talk about is tools for the job. So top talent, we talked about how operationally do you show up, that you're getting that good branding, that you're feeding the energy, that culture just thrives. They will naturally brand for you, whether they're current top talent or past top talent with you. The second one was using DISC behavioral science for job matching, development plans, mentorship programs, again, getting them in their natural energy zone. The third one was productivity optimization, focusing on that meeting dysfunction and cleaning those up through the right facilitators and how you apply the formats of your meetings. The fourth one is tools for the job. When I go into organizations, or even when I was in my organization, sometimes you evaluated a chaotic situation or a situation that is failing to the goal, and they didn't even have the tools for the job or the permissions in the system. And I'm talking basics. I'm talking about basic standards of, if someone's laptop goes down, is the standard that IT has a backup for anyone where their laptop goes down? Or are we just waiting 2 days and this person who uses their computer for everything is just waiting? Do you have not only backups of IT, but backups if a key resource like top talent is unavailable? And I saw this come up in our manufacturing plant where certain things of quality nature had to run through our technical department. But our technical department was spread across 3 plants, 24/7 operation. So if there was another issue at a different plant, and they were all in because it was a top customer or a big problem, the other plants lost their resource. So then they had to wait. And that dysfunction causes a huge energy drainer because they want to do a good job. Top talent wants to do a good job. But if they have a lack of resource or a backup of such resource, they have to stop. And that means I don't hit the goal. That means I don't have a plan B that I'm in control of. Do you see where some of that burnout factors come in when you start to lose control of what you had control of? So what other resources or plan Bs do you have for backup situations when those key resources aren't available? And that's just a risk management practice you should do in your organization, is those bottlenecks, stop points. Do you have a backup when they aren't available? Or if they're top talent and leave, that you have a plan B so that you don't risk a lot more in your operation than just the person leaving. So are they set up for success? And I'm talking from day one, are they set up, but also backups when dysfunction and those bottlenecks of resources begins? Do you have a plan B? And then do they have resources to go to ask questions, or do they get shoved off? And this goes back to the culture piece. Is it okay to fail? There was some organizations that I went into that it would take a couple sessions before people would speak up, or they would speak up in an email to me so I could bring it into the next session because they didn't feel comfortable bringing it up. That shows lack of synergy, lack of trust, lack of team energy, because they can't even bring up issues without being shut down. So do you welcome failures, conversations about failures, as long as it's solution orientated to move forward? Again, tools to do their job well. If you can't show up and have your basic IT equipment, if you can't show up and ask great questions to do a good job, why would you work there? Again, you're deteriorating top talent. So these 4 things really just are a concept of focusing time towards them, and minimal budgets, really, when you think about it, compared to job posting. Job posting, on average, with the advertisement of it, all the phone interviews of not great clients, you're talking about $20,000. And usually when I'm talking to HR people, they got like a $5,000 budget for the whole year for all their programs. So when you start to reframe, can you afford to do workforce energy management programs? Can you afford to do leadership training? Can you afford to work on your operation? I'm going to reframe you again to ask yourself, can you afford not to attract and retain your top talent? Because at a cost of 150% of their salary per the SHRM and Gallup research statistics, I don't think most operations can afford not to. So I hope you enjoyed this series. I left you a couple minutes to really absorb this information. How can you apply to your organization? I hope to see you in April when we start to dig into workforce energy management a little bit more through this webinar series. And we're going to be focusing on bridging the generation gap at work. And in May, we're going to be talking about employee burnout, some supportive actions you can apply in your organization. We'll see you soon. Today's step matters. It's in the micro moments that real change begins. Managing your energy isn't about shame, blame, or disrupting your lifestyle. It's about the small, intentional choices to reclaim that natural energy.
If this episode hit the mark for you, share with others. This journey doesn't have to be lost and lonely, but exciting and full of new paths. See you back here to continue the adventure.